Tom?
Good evening, Council. Just a bit of an oddity that we found. As you're well aware, our mayor is away and had intended to be away for this particular meeting. Our deputy mayor is unable to attend as well this evening. And according to our procedural bylaw, and in accordance with the procedural bylaw, Council is required to appoint an acting chair for the meeting this evening. Administration is suggesting that the previous deputy mayor, Councillor Anderson, be appointed as chair for the evening's meeting. So what has to happen, I guess, procedurally is a motion needs to be passed. And upon that motion being passed, the chair will automatically go to Councillor Anderson, who will call the meeting to order and work through the rest of the agenda. So again, members of council, there is a motion to ensure that we have a procedurally correct chair for the meeting this evening.
Yes, thank you, CEO. I'll make the appointment that Councillor Anderson be appointed as acting chair for the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting on April 3rd, 2023.
That's correct.
Can I call that to question, even though I'm not chair?
Yes, I believe.
All right. Well, let's we'll call that to question. All in favor? And that passes. Thank you for that, town manager, and thank you for the opportunity to chair another meeting. I did not expect to be back in this seat so soon. I don't have the wit of a Mayor Choi or the experience of Deputy Mayor Hansard, but I'm happy to fill in this evening. So welcome to our April 3rd, 2023 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. Members of council, we have an agenda here before us. I'm sure we've all had the opportunity to take a look and review. We will have Councillor Meyer with the motion, please, this evening.
Yes, thank you. Deputy, former Chair.
Former Deputy
Thank
Mayor.
you, thank you, Chair. Yes, the April 3rd, 2023 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you for the motion. Administration, do we have anything to add to the agenda this evening?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you for that. With that, we will call to question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Next up, we have our public input session. This is the time we allow members of the public to speak to council about anything that is not on the current agenda. Administration, is anyone registered to speak this evening?
Through the chair, there is not.
Thank you. Is there anyone in chambers this evening that would like to speak to council about anything that is not on our current agenda? All right. With that, we will move on to number 4, presentation and delegation. And I have the privilege to invite our Stony Plain and Spruce Grove MLA, Cyril Turton, to provide an update to us this evening on behalf of the government of Alberta. So MLA Turton, welcome here this evening.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and the rest of council. Thank you once again for the opportunity to come chat with you and just tell a couple little updates about what is happening on the provincial level, and we can talk about some projects that are obviously mutually important to both levels of government. So I will say, first of all, Mr. Chair, I know you said you didn't have the wit of Mayor Choi or the experience of Deputy Mayor Hansard, but I will say you are one of the 2 best-looking councillors on town council, but I will let all of you decide to fight it out who's the other one.
Who's number 2? Well, you know what? I'll take it. I appreciate
Awesome.
that.
But no, first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to come here tonight. So touch base on a couple little points. And before I begin, I just want to again stress just how much of an absolute privilege it is to be the MLA for Stony Plain and Spruce Grove. This may surprise you, but rumor has it that there is an election coming up. And so I don't take anything for granted, but for what it's worth, I just want to say absolutely how much of an honor it's been to represent the town of Stony Plain in the legislature. And I will also let you know that we're slowly making progress. Speaker Cooper many times is now referring to the provincial riding as the riding of Stony Plain Spruce Grove. So we just have to make it official with the Premier, but we are making progress. He always gives me a big wink every time he says Stony Plain first, because I know how much of a pleasant conversation and competition there is with our fine neighbors just to the east of us. So in terms of just a couple provincial projects that we are talking about that are coming close to completion and that are in discussion with the province. So as you know, Stony Plain Central School is almost completed. Originally, it was supposed to be complete in January of this year, but just due to some construction delays, it got pushed to the start of the new year. It makes it a little bit easier as well for the transition from one school year to the rest. So I'm actually quite excited. I know I was walking by that area on the weekend, and I think anyone looking at that school sees what an absolute improvement it is over the the former building. And we just know that it's going to provide a whole, generations of fantastic education for kids here in our town. I also want you to know that I've been talking extensively with Minister Copping, Minister of Health, about Westview Medical Center. As many of you know, our area has been growing immensely. And I know when I graduated from high school in Spruce Grove in the late 90s, I think Spruce Grove at that time had a population of about 18,000. I think Stony Plain was about 8, and both communities have, more than doubled since that time. And our hospital, since it was constructed, I think it was in the early 2000s, if memory serves me right, when it was upgraded, obviously has served us well, but it's definitely in need of an upgrade. So I have been dealing with the AHS regional coordinators about where the Westview Medical Center is in terms of the capital priority plans for upgrading. There is, those discussions are in the works. So for the central AHS director, they do have to prioritize where Westview is compared to all the other hospitals in the donut around Edmonton. And so I know from my discussions with them, and many people may not realize this, is that Stony Plain actually has one of the highest amounts of day surgeries out of any of the regional hospitals surrounding Edmonton. There are thousands and thousands of people that come all the way out from Edmonton to go for different types of surgeries. I don't have the list in front of me right now, and it is definitely used to the max, but there is still some room for long-term housing. There's a lot of long-term care that's being done there at the hospital. And so those plans are actually being discussed. So I'm hoping that capital region prioritization list will come out, and I'm working diligently with the minister to make sure that any potential upgrades happen sooner than later. So I think everyone here in the town would absolutely love to see that facility expanded so that we don't have to go to West Edmonton to the Miz or else to Devon. Also recently, in the last couple of weeks, I was very pleased to have Minister Nixon come on out for the Meridian Foundation announcement. I know many individuals here in this room were there, so thank you very much to all members of council that attended that historic announcement. And just for the benefit of the hundreds of people watching online right now, that is, I believe, a $35 million facility with funds both from the federal, provincial levels to be able to create a new long-term lodge expansion in Spruce Grove. It's going to be just on Callahoo Road there by the old Boston Pizza. And this is, I think, going to create well over 100 new seats for long-term care for seniors here in our area. Because as you know, there's many seniors that are retiring in the county surrounding the town and the city. They're moving into the urban areas. They want to be closer to their families, closer to medical facilities. And for us to be able to continue to expand long-term care here in this area, I think is just going to be an immense, another reason why people will be choosing to call Stony Plain home. Just because of the different facilities that we have here in this area, catering to all ages, both for youth as well as seniors. And I guess a nice segue into youth, obviously, I know those conversations are ongoing about the rec center, so I know it hasn't quite got up to my level yet in terms of what the plans are, the types of grant programs, but I do want you to know that when the town finally solidifies the plan, I look forward to discussions with the town and being able to make that rec center one of my highest priorities, if successful in my next term, and make sure that the rejuvenation of Old Town takes place. I know very clearly the effects and the positive reasons why that rec center is going there. It's going to be an amazing asset. It's going to tie in very nicely with the new Francophone school, as well as Stony Plain Central, and it's going to really kind of create that life and that right for that central core of Stony Plain. I think that's what everyone wants. I know that's what I want, and so, and then when fast forward a couple years when it's completed, then we can brag to Spruce Grove about how wonderful it is. But it's, works out nice that the curling rink is going to be attached there. But as I said, I know from my perspective, I haven't seen the final proposals yet. I know there's still a little bit of due diligence that has to happen, but I look forward to advocating on your behalf to make sure that happens. And then also, I just want to give a quick update about extended producer responsibility. As many of you know, this was one of my key projects that I worked on over the last couple of years. This has to deal with advanced recycling programs here in the province of Alberta. I did put motion 510 3 years ago in the legislature, which was accepted, and then it turned into legislation put forth by Minister Nixon at the time. And just for a recap for anyone that's interested, is that this really updates Alberta's recycling program by about 20, 30 years. I mean, Alberta is one of the last provinces in the country to be able to move forward with extended producer responsibility. This is an amazing program that will actually save municipalities right across the province, in essence, millions of dollars. It will increase landfill diversion, be able to put a whole host of different levies and really make sure that we have the safe recycling of products and goods right over the province that would typically be thrown into landfills, which taxpayers would then have to pay for. So those discussions are ongoing. I will admit it's a little bit more complicated than I thought in terms of the regulations, but I was actually having a meeting just, I think it was a week or two ago, with the CEO of Alberta Recycling Management Authority, Ed Guggenheimer, and he assures me that those discussions are ongoing. So we're going to, over the next year or two, we're going to see more and more product streams going onto the extended producer responsibility program. You're going to see more levies attached. And then you're going to see more producers being able to actually dispose of these different items. So that means that there's going to be a little bit more of a comprehensive discussion amongst municipalities right across the province about how to recycle goods and products. But as municipalities are some of the largest collectors of items, obviously for disposal, we want to make sure that, I almost said AUMA, so there was not a swear jar there, but AM and RMA are connected into those conversations, because we want to make sure that we have strong partnerships with our municipalities as we slowly roll out these enhanced recycling programs. And at that point, Mr. Chair, I know I could keep rambling, but I'd love to turn it over to any questions that you or your council may have. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. I know we have conversations kind of throughout the year, but this is a time where we can hear specifically about some of the funding coming into our region, some of the advocacy work that is specific to Stony Plain, and so it's great to hear what's been going on at the legislature. Before we turn it over for questions, just want to share some appreciation on behalf of council and our community. With the recent budget coming out, there are certainly some things that will benefit our community. We saw a doubling of the local government framework, or fiscal framework, for operating funding. We saw some increases for libraries and FCSS. Certainly the transition from the municipal sustainability initiative to the LGFF framework can lead to some anxiety and questions. And it's great to see that we're going to have some a little more predictability in where that funding is going as we move forward year to year, and we certainly appreciate the impact that that's going to have on critical infrastructure projects in our community. So certainly some appreciation from us. Also, you spoke to some of the projects specific to Spruce Grove in terms of the long-term care expansion, and as you're well aware, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, Parkland County work very well together in the tri-region as we become known locally, but also I think within the province. And so even though that is a facility that will be built in Spruce Grove, certainly a shared benefit for our residents as well. And so we certainly appreciate the province of Alberta, or the government of Alberta, providing some funding there, because we know residents of all three municipalities will benefit. So thank you for that. With that, we'll turn it over to council with some questions. Councillor Palechko, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming this evening. We always appreciate the updates from the MLA, but it also gives us an opportunity to put you a bit on the hot spots. So I'm going to put you on the hot spot a little bit here this evening and ask you a question regarding the Westview Health Center. You talked a bit about it, but I always get the impression that prior government, this government, and going forward, we tap dance around our Westview Health Center a fair bit. It currently serves probably close to 100,000 regional residents in the area, and not much has happened at it over the last little while. So I'm looking for some, maybe a little more specifics as to how you think that you can advocate for this to be able to help it move forward. I know we heard at AM this past that there's some new hospitals being built and, some of the old ones being upgraded and stuff like that. So I think now is a really good time for the government in the position that you're in with some surplus and stuff like that to really consider the Westview Health Center. So my question is, how will the province invest in regional hospitals like the Westview Health Center to help enhance health services for our growing region and reduce the strain on both patients having to be transported to larger urban hospitals, as well as reduce emergency wait times?
Excellent, and I will say, Councillor Palechko, and thank you so much for the question through you, Mr. Chair, that it didn't surprise me that you had the first question, because I know you've never hesitated to put me on the hot seat. So, but that is a very important question, because as a province, I know I guess with most infrastructure projects, it's always interesting and exciting to look at the brand new toy, but I mean, there's critical pieces of infrastructure that we need to ensure are supported and continue to grow along with the communities that they serve. And Westview is a perfect example of that. And the very fact that AHS and the regional zone director here, that there's active conversations about having Westview move up the prioritization list to the point where it will be near the top of the list in terms of capital projects here in the Edmonton area, shows the significance that this facility has had amidst a growing community like Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, Parkland County. And so we have to obviously wait for that prioritization schedule to come out to be able to see exactly where it is according to all the different priorities here in the capital region. But when it does, I plan on taking that report firsthand to the minister, and again, armed with the exact data from AHS to show them, hey, look, our community has grown. We need to be able to pour those investment or those infrastructure dollars into communities like Stony Plain, so we can make sure that the families here are properly looked after. And so, and like I said, with the amount of day surgeries that's happening at Westview, I mean, this is not the quaint little hospital that maybe some people think that it is. This is a bustling, modern-day medical facility that is serving a growing population, and we need to make sure that it's looked after. And another key part of that, my answer to your question, Councillor Palechko, has to deal with moving families and patients here to like the Miz or to Edmonton, like for example, for CT scanners. And that is a growing need that we need to be able to address here. Something I have talked specifically with Minister Copping about is making sure that we have that advanced type of diagnosis care here so that we don't have to take patients here, ship them all the way to Edmonton, have them diagnosed with medical equipment, and then have them come back here. Because a lot of people don't realize is that when patients are en route between Stony Plain and the Miz on the West End, it actually we have to keep a bed free for that patient. Like there's rules with AHS. We just can't move someone out to Edmonton for a couple hours and then fill the bed with somebody else. We actually have to keep the bed free for when they come back. And so there's an inefficiency there by us not having advanced medical equipment here at Westview. And I've had those conversations with Minister Copping, outlining and saying, look, there's the travel time, there's inefficiencies here. We want to make sure that regional hospitals like this are protected. And that's the type of message that I've been able to give to the rest of my caucus members as chair of the Cabinet, or the Social Services Cabinet Policy Committee. And through that committee, and that is another role that Premier Smith gave me, is that is the chair of the Cabinet Policy Committee, in which any policy, regulatory, or legislative changes that deal with healthcare, children's services, mental health and addiction, all go through that committee. And we have some real teeth. Like, it's not like just a lip service committee. And so any changes that come about, any suggestions that come out, come through that. And I'm very thankful that Premier Smith asked me to chair that one. Because, I mean, when you look at all the ministries that have their respective ideas put through that committee, it works out to almost 65-70% of the provincial budget. So, Councillor Palechko, your question is bang on. We need to have some of that advanced diagnostic care here in Stony Plain. And I have not stopped advocating for that. But I think the last piece is that we just need to be able to have AHS be able to quantify where that Westview facility is compared to everything else. And I'm not at all saying that Westview isn't important. It is. But, you know, the prerogative of AHS is to prioritize all their projects, the projects in Leduc, the projects in Edmonton. And so, you know, we have to let that process play out first. But the second the ink is dry, I look forward to making sure that Westview gets the priority attention that I think it deserves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we talk through this, I appreciate that there's lots of planning and strategy that needs to be done. We do that at this table as well, trying to figure out what's key for each of our projects that we need to move forward. But one of the things that we really have missed out here for quite some time is they closed our helipad down. And that has really not fizzed anywhere other than we've been told that it's going to stay closed. It was a key part of our area for a long time, just for the emergency side of it. I'm wondering where that gets back on the table. We have a great spot. I'm sure it can be expanded to fit the new helicopters that are available, and I'm just wondering where that gets back on the table.
So thank you, Councillor Palechko, through you, Mr. Chair. So I will admit my memory's a little fuzzy on this, but I did, this is a couple years ago, we did ask those questions to Minister Copping, and from my understanding, there was enhanced improvements of some of the helipads in Edmonton, and from a flight perspective, they were saying for advanced trauma cases, it wouldn't be that much or more difficult to be able just to fly someone an extra minute or two and then be at a larger hospital with some of those advanced diagnostic care and equipment that they have. But I do know that's a question I receive at the doors as well, hear about the helipad. I know there was, you know, obviously the site was configured to be able to accommodate that, but it's definitely something I can ask again and see if there's been any change from the ministry's perspective or HS's perspective about maybe utilizing that asset here in the town, especially if we're having conversations about maybe potentially bringing CT scanners or some other types of advanced medical equipment, because then it makes sense to be able to perhaps maybe have Stony Plain more as a medical destination if needed, but it's definitely something I could bring up to the minister at my next meeting with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palechko, and I appreciate the responses, MLA Turton. I took a call from a resident just over a week ago, about a week and a half ago, and very much the scenario that you just described had played out for their family. So a grade 5 student, about 10 years old, had some acute pain in his abdomen and ended up sitting in Westview for a significant length of time, I think 5 or 6 hours, and then got sent to Edmonton for a CT scan, had a significant wait there as well, and then returned to Westview. And I think by the time all was said and done, they were looking at 18 or 20 hours just to have that CT scan and receive the results. So, you know, as you described, it's certainly something that we're hearing from our residents. And so it's great to hear that there's been advocacy for those diagnostic pieces that will certainly increase the care that our residents receive. So thank you for that. Councillor Loyns, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, MLA Turton, for being here. I have 2 questions so far.
I'm sure there's going to be another.
I'm probably sure there will be. But we'll just start with funding. We've been asking for provincial funding to go beyond the dedicated infrastructure program for the LGFF in support of our new regional rec center. How will the province partner with the town to provide a new regional rec center for the town of Stony Plain?
Well, thank you very much for the question there, Councillor Loyns, to you, Mr. Chair. So obviously, I mean, I think we need to still have a couple of conversations about how much the project is going to be. As you know, Spruce Grove with their rec center came down. There was considerable provincial investment into that project. And I would put the same amount of effort, obviously, into the town of Stony Plain. You know, as when you look at your tri-regional indoor recreation strategic plan, which I was a part of when I was on city council in Spruce Grove for many, many years, it talks about clearly about the need for a new recreational facility here in Stony Plain. And, you know, there's going to be not just Stony Plain families using the field houses or the curling rink in Stony, but it'll be families from all over Parkland County, Spruce Grove as well. I mean, we truly are an integrated community with the county, the town, and the city. So when it comes to different types of funding models, obviously we have to have those conversations about price tags, if there's you know, MSIs to be used, or if there's additional grant funding. I do know that there's already conversations that are happening, which unfortunately won't be settled in the next 27 days. But I think there's probably room for a more wide-ranging conversation after the election about maybe some different some different funding tools that municipalities maybe could be using to be able to fund recreation. Now, this is just Searle's opinion, but I know I have brought up to Minister Schultz about the potential for either CRLs or else maybe a change to the offsite levy program to be able to look at new and innovative ways that municipalities can fund new recreational facilities. Just last week or the week before, I did go for a tour with Edmonton Public Schools as well as numerous Edmonton City Council councillors. And we went through South Edmonton, for example, and saw a couple high schools that they had innovative approaches with city recreational facilities attached to public schools. I went to the one high school down there, and the name escapes me. It starts with an L. But it was a fantastic partnership. It had the ability for a school and a recreation facility. And so, you know, there's incredible examples of different levels of government, different organizations coming together for the betterment of communities so that families can live, work, and play in a certain area. And I think we need to look at trying to find a process so that we can make it the norm for those types of partnerships to happen versus the exception. And so, again, I look forward to those conversations with the town post-election, if given the privilege to serve here in this capacity, to be able to look at ways that, you know, we can have those conversations. And, you know, like I said, it's a little bit premature to say the exact funding model, but I will be doing everything humanly possible to be able to make sure that that facility gets the time and attention it deserves at the legislature with the various ministers.
Do you have another follow-up?
Not in regards to that.
Okay. No, and I was just going to comment, I certainly appreciate the comments around some of the currently available, you know, funding, whether it's MSI, the transition to, you know, the new municipal funding or the local government funding framework that's in place. And I think MLA Turton, you nailed it when you referenced the tri-regional plan. And, you know, this is a facility that we're not looking at just for Stony Plain, but for our region. And, you know, we talk about Parkland County, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, you know, it's, you know, the Tri-Leisure Center in Spruce Grove services residents from all regions. And, you know, this is a facility that we're considering here in Stony Plain that would serve the same purpose. And so we look forward to, you know, those further discussions as things get hammered out here in the future. So thank you for that. Any other questions?
Yes, I have another question though.
We'll come back. Jump over to Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two thank yous, hopefully a short story, and two questions. So you can break me up.
All we're missing is the song.
Right? Yeah. So first,
song
from the library board, I know you spoke in favor of increasing the funding for the libraries in the legislature, so the library board definitely appreciates that and would like to pass along their thanks. Also, just on the EPR, I was just having a discussion with the gentleman the other day who was talking about the need for like a recycling type facility locally, and I kind of hit on him about you know, we took a big hit there when China stopped taking our garbage, and he said, and that's why we need to take care of it ourselves. So kudos to you for championing that as well. But hitting on the rec facility, so in my first term, this is my story now. In my first term, I wanted to just see what was going on in Stony Plain on my birthday. So I tootled on down to the Multicultural Center and snuck into the records and found a newspaper clipping from May 3rd just shortly after my birth, and in it, Dwight Gansky is getting quoted about the rec facility, and he's pounding on the desk going, "We haven't built any rec in this town since 1967." And sadly, that is still true 30 some odd years later. So that rec facility, I know you say you understand the need for it and the growth of Stony Plain and all the rest of that. So I won't hit on that, but I do want to hit on how long it's been since Stony Plain has had a new facility. So Councillor Loynes, you asked a good question there. So I actually only have one question, and I'm just going to switch gears again. I'm sorry. I have been approached by some people in regards to a Christian charter school here. And of course, with the election coming in, they're concerned, again, about the funding being lifted from their school. I was just wondering if you could comment on your viewpoint on such matters.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the question and comments and the story there, Councillor Meyer, through you, Mr. Chair. You know, real just briefly, when you're talking about Mr. Gansky, and I think he's a hero for many of us. I think he served on Stony Plain Town Council for longer than I've been alive, and I think his impact in this community has been absolutely incredible. But when you talk about, you know, decisions a long time ago, I guess I'm dating myself. I remember Councillor Badgery and myself giving a presentation in 2011 about the importance of the indoor recreation study at that point. All of a sudden I'm like, man, that's like 12, 13 years ago. So I mean, I guess I've been in this a long time. But no, thank you again, first of all, for your comments about the need for that recreation center. And like I said, the first step, obviously, to the process is for the 7 fine elected individuals on town council to be able to come up with a decision first about the makeup and what the facility will look like. And then at that point, it's my job, or the MLA's job at that point, to be able to advocate and work with the minister for different funding options at that point. And I look forward to potentially having that opportunity. In terms of the potential impacts of, you know, a private Christian school potentially being, you know, shut down, I know that there was some of that concern prior to 2019. I will say for myself and the government that I'm a part of is that educational choice is extremely important to us, extremely important to me. I think there's a wide mosaic of educational options that families here in Stony Plain can utilize, both homeschooling, public schools, separate schools, private Christian schools, and I think that vast educational mosaic is really what makes our area incredible. And I guess I forgot to add in a Francophone school experience, which Stony Plain has, which I always brag about. I know Minister LaGrange was out just visiting that school there, I think 2 weeks ago. But I think, you know, obviously educations do provide a lot of anxiety in terms of especially private independent schools. I know for myself personally, I've always been a massive supporter for having that educational option while maintaining that the majority of funding goes to where it needs to go, which is the actual public education systems. I think the public school systems, which both include the separate, the Francophone, and the public school system, educate close to 96 or 97% of students. And that's where I think the majority of funding should go. But that being said, I know in the last budget that we did put forth, the government did put forth a number of different options regarding transportation that made it a lot easier for students that attend private Christian schools or independent schools like St. Matthew's here in Stony Plain to be able to utilize, which will obviously make it easier on their own pocketbook, and not just for them, but for students right over the Tri-Region. You know, educational experience is incredible, but we want to make sure it's not an onerous burden for families to be able to get their kids to school as well. And that's why that was a pretty significant upgrade in the provincial budget to be able to provide extra busing options for students with all the different school boards. So at this point, obviously, I realize I can't speak to the results of the election before it's done, but just know that for myself, I'm a massive advocate for independent schools here in this area, and I look forward to potentially seeing you know, St. Matthew's here in Stony Plain continue to educate children for many years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Thank you, MLA Turton. All right, sir, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Emily Turton, for being here this evening, and also thank you for the last 4 years. As you said, we're entering into the election period here right away, and this may or may not be the last time we have you in chambers in front of us as our elected MLA, so I'd just like to thank you for everything you've done for us for the last 4 years, and wish you all the best in moving forward with that. I would be remiss if I didn't add comments on the rec center, as we have heard. Obviously, a very important project to the town. You mentioned a little bit about, where we are in the process and moving on, and, I think we're looking at it, and Councillor Meyer hit the nail on the head. You were an incredible support for the library and helping us get done what we had done there. And I think it's just important to understand that libraries are to some what rec centers are to others. And there's a variety of people within our community who have varying different needs. 60 plus years, for rec, and that just goes to show the appreciation we have for our staff, for the quality of facilities we have, and the care that they take of those facilities to ensure that those facilities remain viable and usable for our public. We do, though, have the concept. We do know what's going in it. We do have a lot of what you've mentioned already, and we are in the process right now. Council has already approved going to the final design and the RFP documents for approval this coming September. So while we don't expect the province to, come with a check for the full amount, we'd appreciate it. I don't quite think we need to get to the full amount before we have some serious advocacy and start those discussions of where the province can assist in that. So, I'd be remiss too if I didn't bring up the fact of the unfortunate incident of the curling rink gave us a great opportunity to integrate that facility into the new rec center. And it's incredibly important to them as well to make sure that that facility is back. They've already lost several years. They're going to be looking at least one more season, probably two. And that's a facility that our community had that we lost. And since the time that we lost that, while they received insurance monies, the inflationary crisis has caused that to be a significant challenge for them, even if they were to try and rebuild that facility as an independent facility. So I'm looking forward to further conversations that can be had on that, obviously, likely after the election, but I just wanted to stress the importance on that. I do want to ask a question, though, and you mentioned, I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly the title you had just stated that Premier Smith had put you into, the social services?
Social Services Cabinet Policy Committee.
Excellent. So that's a perfect...
Long one for the business cards.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue, and we just had our Spring Leaders Caucus, and we were able to hear from Premier Smith, and she addressed something in regards to FCSS. We also heard from FCSSAA. Very excited to see that in this budget, for the first time in many, many, many years, probably since back to when you started on council yourself, FCSS actually received an increase in funding from $100 million annually to $105 million annually, which is welcome. But following that, we then heard from FCSSAA that even just to keep up with the inflation and the increase in the cost of living and the cost of goods, et cetera, that FCSSAA paid it at $130 million just to keep services flat, based on when the last increase was to today. So we're still $25 million short. In addition to that, we know it's hard to put a number on the cost of prevention or what are the savings from prevention, but they average it out at $1 spent in prevention is equivalent to $7 to $12 in aftercare. And that aftercare comes in the Justice Ministry. That aftercare comes in health. So the $25 million that we're still short equates to $175 to $300 million spent in justice and health. We also then heard that there is an election promise, which we all know not to maybe put so much into the buckets, but of a significant increase in funding to FCSS from the opposition party. So I'm wondering if you can shed a little bit of light on what you can do and what your government plans on doing to increase the support to FCSS to help us save those dollars and help us work on the preventative side rather than the reactionary side.
Thank you very much for the comments, and Councillor Laurie, through you, Mr. Chair. Your passion on this file definitely rings out, and so thank you very much for advocating on the fact for so many families here regarding FCSS. Before I answer the FCSS question, I do realize that with your preamble at the beginning, I did miss a couple parts about Councillor Meyer's questions about libraries, so I apologize about that. So I'll just go back really quick, address some issues about libraries. But I know Minister McIver, when he was actually the Municipal Affairs Minister, I did bring him out here to Stony Plain, went for a tour of the library here, which again, I still think is one of the nicest libraries in the entire capital region. And even Minister McIver acknowledged, he says, MLA Turton, you're probably you've given the highest amount of speeches regarding library funding and the importance of libraries in the legislature over the last 4 years. Because as I've said before, and I'm sure many of you know, I served as a library board trustee prior to being elected as a Spruce Grove City Councillor in 2010. So I think I served for 2 years as a public member. And libraries are so much more than just repositories of books. They're actually community hubs, because for many people, when you don't know where to go, you go to a library. And now, libraries are becoming the heart and soul of many communities in terms of either economic activity, in terms of job fairs, for people to help build resumes, for kids to be able to understand and discover that wonderment of a new book. And so libraries, I find, are critical for just creating that soul and social fabric of many of our communities. And so, the fact that Stony Plain has their library in such a central and prevalent fashion downtown, and you just see the amount of development and it kind of creating almost that anchor for the Stony Plains downtown revitalization, which has happened over the last couple of years. I just truly, again, it really is better in Stony Plain when it comes to just the spirit, and I really think the library that you have downtown is a key part of that. And so I know the Libraries Act still has to be revisited. As many of you may or may not know, it's one of the oldest pieces of legislation on board right now in the legislature. It needs a massive overhaul to kind of take into consideration some of the high-value technology that's coming in terms of like broadband internet, the ability to be able to have exams remotely. For many colleges and universities are looking for places to have those exams, and libraries are a key part or key area where that could potentially take place. And so obviously, post the election, I'm sure there'll be many conversations about an update to the Libraries Act and the potential funding. But I guess regarding funding as well, I know I was at a meeting with Minister Toews when he was giving a budget presentation. And one of the comments he said was, I forget what the exact program, I don't think it was FCSS, but what he said and the answer he gave still rings true. He said, the question was about inflationary adjustments for one program or not. And I appreciate Mr. Toews because he said he wasn't going to talk about the merits of the program because it's all important. There are no frivolous programs out there. There's always a family on the other side of that program that needs help from the province. And FCSS is no different. But from his, description of it, he says right across the board, if he was to give just simple COLA adjustments and inflationary increases for all the departments that were actually looking for it, we would turn a $2.4 or $2.2 billion surplus into almost a $20 billion deficit. So it's significant. And I'm not at all discouraging the wonderful work that FCSS does. For many of the programs that we deal with, that you deal with on a municipal level, people may choose to have a house in a municipality, but FCSS is one of those programs that makes it a home. Because for many people and families that utilize FCSS, when they're walking in through those doors, that may be actually one of the worst days of their life when they're going in. And FCSS program and the incredible people working in those programs are actually giving them hope when they're coming out, because they don't know where to turn to. And I think FCSS and the services and programs that comes out of that truly does make a difference. And so, Councillor Laurie, I totally understand your passion for this file. I know elections, election promises are kind of like belly buttons. Everyone has one these days. And I want you to know that, our government clearly understands the importance of the FCSS. We want to continue to see it supported. But obviously, there's a lot of other priorities as well. And I guess as elected officials, as leaders here in the town, it's up to you to be able to decide about one priority versus another. And they're always important priorities because we're always dealing with the needs of families that need help. But I guess just in terms of context, and I know, unfortunately, our memories are a little vague, but if you recall, it was only about 3 years ago that the province of Alberta went through the largest energy crash in our province's history, we were looking at deficits potentially of $18 billion. We were dealing with the potential of having Syncrude and Suncor go bankrupt. I mean, it was a fairly significant hit that hit the province, and obviously we wanted to make sure that critical investments in education and healthcare remained intact, and tough decisions had to happen. And then obviously, I know it's easy to forget as well about the nuances and the pain that our province and our world utilize and realize under COVID as well. There was enhanced needs and asks in terms of healthcare, making sure that doctors and training of medical workers can continue to increase. So there are needs all over the province, Councillor Laurie, but in terms of your passion and the need, now that we're hopefully past those two once-in-a-century events, I never want to go through another pandemic or an energy crash. I promised my wife I would never serve as an MLA during one of those again, so consider that a small mini guarantee that nothing like that will happen. No, don't hold me to that. But Councillor Laurie, your passion is well received, your message is well received. I'm looking forward to having those types of discussions post-election about how we can, again, deal with long-term funding, because I agree with you. The community hub or dealing with preventative measures can save millions down the road instead of like addressing homelessness issues and seeing problems really escalate. So I understand that. I know I was chatting with Minister Nixon this morning. We had breakfast with a number of stakeholders in Edmonton. He understands it as well. And I look forward to having those conversations and hearing your suggestions about how we can be a little bit more proactive in that versus just saying, oh, we need more funding. I would like to have more of a conversation about what does a long-term partnership look like versus just saying, oh, there's a problem, give us money, and we just continue the same cycle, because it really is a partnership between municipalities, nonprofits, and the province to be able to kind of take care of a lot of these social issues. I mean, Stony Plain, Spruce Grove are not the quaint little towns and cities and communities anymore. I mean, we're starting to develop big city problems, and we need some innovative, new modern-day solutions to be able to address some of these solutions, because unfortunately, social issues are not going away, and social disorder causes issues to multiple facets of our communities, and we all want to, I think we're all on the same page where we want to be able to address it, and so I look forward to having maybe a more robust conversation in June, potentially with whoever sits in this chair at that point.
Thank you for that. Did you have a follow-up with that specific question?
Just a comment on that, and thank you very much for your well-rounded comments on that. I appreciate it, and you're right. If we could have all the money in the world, we could apparently fix all the problems in the world, but who knows what that would actually create. You brought up the energy crisis, you brought up the health pandemic that we went through, and the reason why this still rings so true to me is because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of an addictions and a mental health pandemic. And FCSS is one of those key tools that we have in our toolbox that needs that support right now that will help us deal with this pandemic in the long term, because if all we continue to do is treat the end result, we'll never fix the problem at its root cause. So I appreciate all the work you've done on that and look forward to your continued conversations on that. I do have a couple others, but I understand others do as well, so we'll just keep passing it around.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Laurie. Thank you. I'm going to go back to Councillor Loynes. We cut off her second question a little bit earlier, so Councillor Loynes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Again, MLA Turton, you talked about your passion project being the Advanced Recycle Program, and several months ago, the GFL recycle plant burnt down in Winterburn, and I understand that's just out of your jurisdiction as MLA. But what I find very disheartening is when you're driving down 16A and you look over at the Northland dump where GFL currently still uses, over by Range Road 261, you can see all the blue bags that are recyclable bags sitting on the top rim of the garbage dump. And when we talk about recycling, again, like I said, it's very disheartening to see that. So how can you or will your government encourage that recycling to actually be done? I know we have the east side out by Sharp Park recycling, but when you see it, obviously it's not being recycled.
Yes, fantastic follow-up question, Councillor Loynes, through you, Mr. Chair. A fully realized extended producer program here in the province of Alberta would actually mean potentially that less would be actually going to the blue bags. If, just to maybe use this as an example, like I know BC, if any of you have traveled there, and right now we have kind of like the blue bags and then we have the recycles and the garbage. In BC, for example, they have probably one of the more advanced extended producer responsibility programs, EPR systems in the country. And for plastics, for example, you're looking at 4 or 5 different types of plastics. And really, what the EPR program does is attach a levy to certain goods and goods and products, and then that levy would then go to a producer that would actually then recycle or repackage that material. So, for example. But it would be the closest equivalent example would be like for pop cans, like 5 cents. So that 5 cents actually goes to the recycling companies. They dispose, they recycle, they reuse, they remold them into new cans. And so right now we're in the regulation or developing the regulation stage of the EPR program. And as you can imagine, there are almost an unlimited number of products and right around the province, everything from heavy cardboard, paper, multiple different types of plastics. Solar panel cells is actually becoming a growing aspect of landfills that unfortunately municipalities are paying for, which obviously just passes the cost down to our taxpayers. And so, these are the types of things that we need to be able to get a little bit more advanced on. I would have loved to see an EPR program 20 years ago, because there were provinces in the country that did have EPR programs for different goods, but unfortunately Alberta is the last to the game, to the dance. But those regulations still are ongoing. One of the few benefits of an EPR, or one of the few benefits of Alberta being last in the country when it comes to developing EPR programs, is that we can actually learn what works. We can learn what doesn't work. And there's some provinces across the country that would be a little bit more of a shining example about what we should emulate. And there's some other provinces across the country, not saying which ones in particular, but they may have the Toronto Maple Leafs in, that we might not have in our best interest to emulate in terms of just the amount of red tape or the amount of bureaucracy, the amount of issues that it causes municipalities and collectors such as the town of Stony Plain. And so we want to make sure we alleviate those potential roadblocks. So I personally live with the adage, from my construction days about measure twice, cut once. And we want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure that there's the least impact to municipalities, to consumers, and that the biggest value waste streams can be properly addressed and diverted. And so that would be my hope, is that because of Alberta embarking on the EPR program, that we can get away from that story of seeing blue bags at the top of landfills, because what's the point? And it's not just in terms of value for dollars, which is extremely important, but we need to be actually proactive in saving the environment. I mean, we don't have another Earth that we can jump to, so we want to make sure that there's a good news story when it comes to goods and products that our families are consuming, and that they can be recycled and taken care of accordingly. So I do know that, like I said, the regulations are ongoing right now. I believe next year, there's some additional waste streams coming on board, but I will admit I haven't got an update on the regulations for a while. It takes a long time to come up with these regulations, and we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. But over the next couple of years, you're going to start seeing more and more products with those levies attached to it. You're going to see organizations set up that can properly dispose and recycle. Another example of an EPR program that's actually in the pilot program, both from the Ministry of Agriculture and agriculture, and I think it's municipal affairs, but actually has to do with egg plastics. I know it's not really a big issue here in the town of Stony Plain, but in many parts of the province you have egg plastics, the plastics that wrap up bales for silage and things like that. Well, I mean, growing up in small town Saskatchewan, a lot of farmers that had to get rid of their egg plastics might have a big old pit and maybe some diesel, and then all of a sudden you don't have an egg plastic problem anymore. But obviously I don't think anyone says that that's actually a good way to be able to treat this product and the environment. And so there's actually a plastic recycling plant in Bashaw that I toured 2 years ago with Minister Dreeshen at the time, as well as the MLA from that area, MLA Lovely. And it takes egg plastics everywhere from as far as Manitoba all the way to the BC border, takes them, recycles them, turns them into plastic pellets, and then is able to ship the plastic pellets back into China for repurposing and remanufacturing of new goods and products. So if you kind of look at the evolution where used to burn plastic in a pit in a farmyard somewhere to all of a sudden repurposing it into clean plastic pellets and now create jobs in rural Alberta shipping so that we can make food products. And now it creates a new business and you're still becoming environmentally friendly. That's what a solid EPR program can actually do. So I guess just to kind of sum up, I know that was a long preamble. I'm pretty passionate about this, but it's my goal over the next couple of years is that there will be less going to the Blue Bag program, more going to down other streams to producers, and actually creating those incentives for people to be able to want or be able to recycle. Because I agree with you, Councillor Loynes. The last thing I want to see are families that are going through all the work of dividing up products in their house and then putting them in a blue bag and then seeing that image of them just going into the landfill. It doesn't do the environment any good. It doesn't help out municipalities. And so I know there's a better way, and luckily for the first time in our province's history, I know we're going down that path with EPR.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, it's a great question. I appreciate the sentiment that we have one world and we need to take care of it. And I think we would all agree on that. Go ahead, Councillor Lyons.
You mentioned the word levies. Are you talking a levy to consumers, or are you talking like a deposit like the 5 cents that they would get back?
So thank you very much, Councillor Loynes. So that would obviously be in the regulations. It's the expectation that there would be some type of deposits program. We don't want to make this overly onerous towards consumers. I know the can analogy that I use is probably the most simplistic one. Obviously, for some products, it may not make sense. I don't want to promise that one size fits all, but we want to obviously make sure that it has as less of an impact as possible. I believe on electronics, there's already different levies, but I know when residents want to garbage or recycle, they don't get the deposit back what they pay for their TVs. So there's all kinds of different models and different scenarios, but it's really important for people to realize that it's not a tax, it's a levy that's going specifically to the disposal and reuse of that product. And so, because if that levy wasn't attached there, then it would just simply go in a garbage bin, and then all of a sudden municipalities, again, taxpayers, would have to pay for the landfill cost to be able to throw that item in there. And so it all of a sudden decreases the lifespan for landfills. It's a massive cost to the individual family. And this is, for example, why AM, not AUMA, I almost said it again there, but AM has actually had on as one of their top resolutions, I think for almost 16 years. They wanted an EPR program. And every year that I was a city councillor, that was something that was always on AUMA's resolutions every fall. And so, it was nice that I think it was 2 years ago, it was the very first year in almost 20 years that AM didn't have to have that resolution on because they knew it started, the legislation had passed, and now we're moving down that path. So there's a lot of work yet on those regulations. And so, like I said, my job as an MLA was obviously to get that ball started. I was very thankful with Minister Nixon. He had me involved with many of the stakeholder meetings up to that point, and we'll see, post-election, what the direction and that the new Minister of Environment, whoever that may be, and how they decide to proceed with it. But regardless, I'll be advocating that the work continues, and I think it will, because we're long overdue in terms of a province and being a little bit more environmentally conscious regarding recycling here in the province. So.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. I just wanted the clarification on levies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lyons. Any other questions this evening? Jump back to Councillor Laurie.
Perfect, thank you. And just in respect of time here, not really in the way of too many questions, more so just two issues that have kind of come up as of late that I want to bring forward. And, if you have any comments on them, fantastic. If not, just bringing them back. The first being, again, at our Spring Leaders Caucus, we had a presentation from the provincial government about the changes to victim services. We've spoken to our local victim services. I've spoken to our local victim services department, and we're very proud of the victim services group that we have in the Parkland Detachment in the Stony Plain and Spruce Grove region here. I would go on a limb to say we probably have one of the best victim services programs in the entire province. However, many of the changes that are coming in are going to have a significant impact on our local group, how our local group operates, how they integrate with the RCMP. So I would encourage conversations, if at all possible, between yourself and the Board of Directors with the Victim Services. Again, I know several of my colleagues were in attendance as well and saw that same presentation. And so we obviously want to make sure that we're not going to see a reduction in service and offerings from our Victim Services Department. the one big thing that I would noted was the relationship between victim services and the RCMP, and how that was proposed to be changed, and how essentially all contact between the Victim Services Department and the RCMP outside of a singular call that they were on together was to no longer exist. I'm not exactly sure how that will work in our area, given that our local victim services operates directly out of the detachment currently. So again, just something to look into. The other thing that I've heard come up over the last little while is the electricity rate cap deferral. And I had to do a little bit of digging into this myself because I didn't actually really understand what had gone on. And I've come to find that the deferral that was put in place, the cap that was put in place, was a deferral. And now all those who are on a regulated rate option are going to be required to pay that back over the following about, I think, 19 months until December of 2024. So what's happening right now is anybody who was on the RRO received this deferral at the rate cap price of 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity. The rate for January, February, March floated between about 20 and 35 cents for that option. So now the providers are going to be recouping that amount from the residents who remain on RRO options. The challenge is that if anybody moves at that point in time to a fixed rate plan, they apparently don't have to pay back their deferral. And that deferral then has to be paid by those who remain on the RRO option. Why I found this incredibly concerning is because even to go to a fixed rate electricity plan on a 30-day contract that does not require any cancellation fees, etc., many people have to pass a credit check. And so further to my comments earlier about FCSS, when we're already dealing with people who are in difficult financial situations, when we're dealing with people who may be coming out of poor situations where they're trying to get back on their feet, if all of a sudden over the next 19 months, they're going to be responsible for a portion of this deferral that is more so than they themselves received, I find that incredibly concerning. As a consumer, I had to go back and look at my bills. I didn't request a deferral, but I received one. I received about $200 in savings, if you'd like to call it that. I could have paid that, not a problem. I can pay my portion of that deferral back over the next 19 months, no problem. But if I choose tomorrow to go to a fixed rate option, now my deferral has to be paid back by somebody who may not have that choice. So I'm quite concerned about that. But again, those are just the two other items that I want to leave you with in comments. Appreciate that you'll bring those back to those who can. If you have anything that you can add to it this evening, fantastic. But don't feel under pressure to provide any answers tonight on those.
Well, thank you very much for that. I guess just a couple comments, and I appreciate all the research that you did. So I kind of feel bad that maybe in the future it would, if I would have had the question, I probably could have done some research and get the appropriate answer for you. But I'll make sure I get that answer sent to you when I review the video and the podcast here. Just regarding victim services, I will admit that, and agree with you, that our victim services here in Spruce Grove and Stony Plain are actually, I would also agree, is one of the best in the province. And I've talked extensively with the directors over there, the board, Mr. Beattie. I know he had an article out in the Examiner as well, and they've been very passionate when we've talked. We've also, had meetings at the legislature extensively about this issue. Again, back to my earlier analogies, that unfortunately when victim services and those amazing workers and volunteers, they get called into action, it's probably the worst day of someone's life. And I think we can, especially when you're talking about, I think everyone in this room can imagine horrific examples where probably victim services would have come out. They see the worst of the worst. And I don't even want to outline some of them for the nightmares that would cause, not just for the people listening, but for the families that are involved in that. And so I appreciate their work. And I know when I've talked with Minister about it, again, back with that provincial lens, and it just was as with many of you, when you're tasked with, helping govern a municipality and you have that 30,000-foot view and you have to come up with policies and procedures for everywhere in the town and kind of get out of our respective subdivisions and areas that we live in. The same is for the provincial level as well. And while Councillor Laurie, I 100% agree with you, and I'm totally biased, just as you are. I think our victim services units out here are truly, if not the best in the entire province in how they operate. Unfortunately, there's many areas in the province that do not have that same level of success. And so as, when the minister goes at that 60,000-foot view and you see all the municipalities and all the victim services units, it's really important from a provincial side to ensure that the same service levels and standards are met from one side of the province to the other. It doesn't matter if you're from La Crete or to Medicine Hat, to Fort McMurray, or to Waterton National Park. And that's the difficult thing when you have exemplary services like we have here, when perhaps they feel as if there's a little bit more shackles on them when they're doing fine, outstanding work. But I know from the experiences and the conversations I've had with the minister, unfortunately, many communities do not share that same experience. And so I know I've had quite a few conversations about every option available, seeing if we could perhaps carve off maybe some of those more superior services that are a little bit more well-running, but then it starts affecting the economies of scale in terms of the programs, and then you have a patchwork of different models that makes it very tough to manage. So at this point, I will continue to advocate for it. Again, I think there's a plenty of room for more conversation about ways that we can improve the total system. I love the fact that our current system is totally integrated in with our RCMP, and that when families they need that service are there. Regardless, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I think that's probably a post-election conversation with whoever's sitting in this chair at that point about ways they can improve the system. But again, I just want to stress to you and agree with your statement that our victim services here are truly the best, and just give full compliments to Mr. Beatty and the rest of them on the board of directors and Janelle and everyone involved with that system, because the stories that they have told me makes the few outstanding hairs on my head just absolutely spin, because I'm so thankful that they're there and doing that work. But so I will continue to meet with them and meet with the minister, but again, that's most probably a post-election question. There's only so much I can do in the next 28 days as the MLA for this amazing community.
And I appreciate that, and thank you. Now, I'll follow up with you in an email on the electrical rate cap deferral, and that way I can provide you with all the information to arm you to go forward and get some answers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Laurie, and thank you, Council, for some great questions being brought forward today. MLA Turton, thank you for taking time out of your evening to be here with us. I know you've got lots on the go. You dropped a number a little bit earlier. I think it was 27 days. I know there's a lot of interest in that date. Potentially the announcement of the upcoming election. So thank you for taking time out of a busy schedule to be here with us. As Councillor Laurie alluded to, we are thankful for your advocacy for our region, primarily as a Spruce Grove councillor, but now moving into your provincial role. We know that we're top of mind as you go into the legislature and advocate for the priorities that we have here in Stony Plain, as well as Spruce Grove. On the desk there, as a copy of our recently approved Town of Stony Plain strategic plan. I'm sure you're well aware Spruce Grove does something similar, but it outlines our priorities, our key actions as we continue to grow and look to strengthen our community. Through the discussion tonight, I've been drawing parallels kind of throughout what you've shared as GOA priorities and how they match with our Town of Stony Plain priorities, and one of those being the enhanced recycling program. You'll notice a bullet in our strategic plan that speaks to enhancing our waste diversion, our recycling, and those sorts of things. And so certainly lots of alignment in priorities from our municipality here in Stony Plain and the province. And so we'll wish you well in your upcoming election. We look forward to seeing the results of that. But we want to say thank you from council, from our team here in our community for your advocacy in the legislature over the last 4 years. With that, before you go, this is tradition, I think, in the legislature. I had the privilege of being introduced a number of years ago when Doug Horner was in your seat, and I see you have a guest here with you this evening. I know we're not the legislature, but maybe just a quick introduction to your guest here.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And so joining me here tonight is actually a very good friend of mine, Crystal, from Spruce Grove. And so She was out helping me, campaigning out in the fine metropolis of Stony Plain here. And, I talked about how excited I was here to come out tonight. And so I know she had said that she hasn't come to a council meeting at Stony Plain, obviously coming from Spruce Grove. So I said, well, you have to come out and meet some of the finest people I know. So she was a trooper, and she decided to come out and listen to me chat with all of you. So very thankful that Crystal was able to come on out here today.
Perfect, thank you for that. And Crystal, welcome. You're from our neighbors to the east there, but we love them. We work very closely with the Spruce Grove City Council as well, and so thank you for taking time to join us this evening.
Yes, and actually, I guess just one thing, I know we're just wrapping up here, but seeing as how this could, potentially be my last time, serving in this role, chatting with each and every one of you, I just want to kind of say publicly again, serving as the MLA for Stony Plain and Spruce Grove, in that order, has truly been one of the ultimate privileges of my life. And it's not a privilege or a task that I take lightly. And, I've been in government for a long time, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I appreciate the conversations, the tough questions that many councillors have always sent me with either a text or a phone call. And, I also just want to thank each and every one of you for putting your names forward, for being leaders in your community is appreciated more than you know. Just, maybe not living right in Stony Plain, but having the absolute privilege to represent you in the legislature and knowing that the town is in great hands, a fantastic administration here as well. So I've known many of the people in this room for so many years, and just know that I don't take it for granted, that I truly have one of the best ridings in the entire province. And just thank you again for the ability and the opportunity to come chat with you here tonight. So thank you.
Perfect, and thank you again for being here, and Crystal as well. Thank you both. Have a great evening. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I will say that every time, I have had copies of the Stony Plain Strategic Plan in the past, and every time Mayor Acker comes over, I always make sure that this is prevalent on my desk so he knows that I'm reading it. And so
He's got to touch the Spruce Grove one underneath. Just
yeah, exactly. It depends who's coming to visit me that
there
day.
you go.
Anyways, thank you all very
awesome.
much.
Thanks again. All right, so that will conclude our presentations and delegations this evening. Number 5 on our agenda is the adoption of committee minutes. So we'll go to Councillor Laurie with that motion, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll move that the April 3rd, 2023 Governance Priorities Committee, we're to the minutes. That the March 6th, 2023 Governance Priority Meeting minutes be accepted as presented.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Members of Council, you've had the opportunity to read and review the committee meetings that are here before us for March 6th. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections? All right, seeing none, I'll call to question. All in favor? And that carries. Moving on to 6.1, crime prevention through environmental design. We're going to look for administration to proceed with their presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. Just quickly, don't typically introduce our staff, but this is the first time that Tiffany Anderson has been in the chambers for most of you. She is our CPO supervisor, and she'll be in front of you a few times this year, actually. So I would like to introduce her just really quickly before she steps us through a crime prevention through environmental design update for council.
Thank you for allowing me a few moments of your time tonight to come and explain what crime prevention through environmental design is and how we utilize it here in the town of Stony Plain with enforcement services. Professor C. Ray Jeffrey was the one who coined the term. He determined that you can intentionally have a positive influence on how a space is used by how it is intentionally designed. This is achieved through 4 principles known as natural access control, natural surveillance, territoriality, and maintenance.
Sorry, can we move the mic a little bit closer there, please? Thank you.
The first principle is natural access control. This determines how people move through a space by intentionally locating things such as fencing, landscaping treatments, and entrances. The second principle is natural surveillance. The principle behind this is that when there is good lighting and sight lines from a space that can be used to view the area organically from other users of the space surrounding the area, it can have a positive influence on the psychology of the individuals in the space. If there is an expectation that they will be seen, they will behave in a more positive manner while they're utilizing that space. In this individual photograph that's on before you today, I took this photograph when I was conducting the review of our skate park. In the photograph on the top, you can see a pickup truck, a very large pickup truck. By chance, Public Works happened to be in that space fixing a bench. When I moved onto the sidewalk and took a photograph from another vantage point, you can see that the shrubs and the trees in that photograph completely hide the view of the truck. This highlights how important natural surveillance and clear sight lines are. Interestingly, in that particular corner is where our team was seeing a lot of negative activity in that space. We were seeing alcohol, drug paraphernalia, even weapons sometimes being hidden under those trees. The wear patterns in that grass also show that that was a very highly accessed location. So by lifting up the trees and making it more visible, you reduce the negative use of that space. By using fencing, treatments, landscaping, you increase the territoriality of a space. When you establish ownership of a space, it discourages less desirable users to come in and take ownership of that space. Good property maintenance is an important part of CPTED. If you have good property maintenance, the perception that that space is owned and looked after is highlighted. This perception will decrease negative behavior because there will be an expectation that it will be reported, detected, and not tolerated. This will also naturally increase the positive users of the space. Currently within our department, we have 4 officers trained. Our completed reports to date include a skate park review, a private property review, the transit bicycle rack locations, as well as the recycle center, which is currently being underway. Depending on the complexity of the individual report, it can take between 8 and 80 hours to complete. Short, long, and midterm recommendations are provided from a CPTED perspective to improve the use of the space. These actual recommendations are implemented through operating and departmental initiatives. A community peace officer on my team developed this checklist. It is for residents to utilize so that they can have a less intensive review if they can go through their own properties themselves. This checklist is available on our town website, as well as it was provided through the Chamber of Commerce so that their businesses can access it to review their own properties as well. From 2018 to 2020, our department saw an increase in the calls for service for our skate park. Between this time period, we saw 124 calls for service between us and the RCMP. Those calls for service ranged from things as simple as parking complaints to off-highway vehicle use, intoxicated persons, to as serious matters as property offenses, assaults, and execution of warrants. This is why we decided to undertake a review of the property from a CPTED perspective. From that review, we divided some recommendations from 5 short-term, 3 midterm, and 4 long-term based on costing and time requirements. 2 short-term recommendations were implemented quite quickly. These included things such as trimming up the trees to increase the sight lines, improvements to the website to increase the skate park being utilized in a celebrated manner, as well as some increased signage. These minor changes created a 70-cent reduction in reduced calls for service. Moving forward, we intend that all CPOs will be trained in CPTED. At least one town-owned property is being reviewed annually. to continue this as a public safety strategy to assist with improving properties. We also utilize this if we're seeing properties that are having increased calls or we're visiting the site often, whether it's public or private, we offer a review as an opportunity to try to solve some of these problems we're seeing.
Thank you for your presentation this evening. I appreciate seeing the skate park in the presentation. It's something that I've heard from residents quite regularly about, and so it's nice to see some of the strategies that have been undertaken to reduce some of the crime behavior that's occurring there, and look forward to seeing how further improvements in the medium to long term will further decrease some of the challenges that we've experienced. So thank you so much for that. With that, Council will open the floor for questions around clarity and understanding on the presentation this evening. Councillor Loyens, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. What are the timeframes for the short, medium, and long recommendations, like 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10? What are we looking at? I understand 2 of them were implemented quite quickly, but.
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Loyens. So certainly it depends on the situation, depends on the property. Some of the short-term ones can be minutes or months. Some of the longer-term or mid-range ones could extend over multiple years, depending on the resources that are required to action each of them. So as an example, at the skate park, like a longer term might be different types of lighting, which might cost a bit more money, that we would go through a corporate plan process as an example, or incorporate into a strategy that we might have from a collective across the board Town of Stony Plain lighting initiative that might be 5 years down the road, that we would just incorporate that into that particular initiative. So it is dependent on the particular recommendation and the site and the action that is hoped to be undertaken by the recommendations. With some of the private property owners, a lot of that is based on budget. We do provide them, and we have worked with several of our industrial park partners, and with Tiffany and her team have certainly provided them with a bit of a recommendation, and with the explanation that if we put the time in, we hope that they would also put the time in the back end. And some have taken those quick wins, which were, from a financial perspective, are less intrusive on their pocketbook, and they've seen some very positive results as an example. But putting up 180 meters of fence might be way more costly as opposed to putting up a motion sensor light. So again, it's based on the resources required and the dollars for the most part from the length of time of implementation.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loyens. Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to administration. I'd like to comment about the community checklist. I appreciate, I'm sure that that's going to be readily available for everyone to download or view on our website. But just going through it, under the maintenance file, it touches on no graffiti, vandalism, or property damage, and then immediately following, there's the case study on Stony Plain Skate Park. I know in the past, we've done and had efforts to try and have some specific graffiti made by artists and whatnot. I'm just curious if part of these longer-term plans for the skate park involve either, well, just in graffiti in general. Are we looking to put more, clean up, leave alone? I'm not sure if you can.
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Meyer, graffiti is it can be positive, it can be negative. I think through our culture department, we did a whole series on graffiti type art, which you'll see in the walkway underneath the ASEAN rail track. So most communities in Alberta, they know that tagging, and I'll put that in quotations because it's a positive. They do suggest to those that use the facility that if you'd like to put some art on the concrete, it's a bit tolerable. If it gets into the gang slang and those types of things that are more negative, then we will do our due diligence to remove that. Typically, when we talk about vandalism on the trail system as an example, so a park bench, light standard, those types of things, if you leave the vandalism on for an extended period of time, then it just, as we saw in the presentation, it suggests that we're not maintaining or keeping things at a top-notch standard. So it encourages more bad behavior. So our staff do go around and make sure that graffiti is removed as quickly as possible. From a private property perspective, we have noticed maybe a year ago today where we did have quite a few graffiti marks on some of the garbage cans, on the registry office, also on the co-op building, and a few others, all the way down to, I think, the post office. There was quite a line of traffic. We did end up, through some extensive research, figuring out who did it, and there was, a punishment levied. But that graffiti, we encourage those that own those properties to get that off quick, so it doesn't encourage others to continue to tag their own type of graffiti on. So at the skate park, sometimes it's encouraged. If we see that it's a bit negative in terms of the graffiti tags, we would likely remove that fairly quickly. We do work with our other enforcement partners to ensure that we understand which ones are ones that we would encourage and maintain and keep and give an outlet for kids to express their artistic talents versus those that are a bit more derogatory and negative in behavior.
Well, I'd like to thank administration for that answer. I'm sure it's a fine line between what is and what isn't, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to stay abreast of that. I'm sure it's something that has to be constantly done. Just a follow-up question in regards to when we encourage, and we do see sort of this rampant vandalism, is there any program, or is it totally at the business's expense to cover up the graffiti?
Your Worship, sorry, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Meyer. Certainly, we do not have a program with the town of Snowy Plain where we would hand out a grant to have people paint over or fix. It's typically, we encourage the private resident to do that themselves. Typically, we don't have to let them know or ask for that to be done. It's done pretty quickly for the most part in the downtown core. I can only recall in my 10 years here, we've had to do it, less than a handful of times. We've had to make a phone call to ask them to get on top of that. So typically, we do see the private resident taking care of that fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer, and I appreciate the response there. Makes me think of the broken window theory, and I think our general manager explained that well, where visible signs of misbehavior in a community can often lead to future disorder and misbehavior. And it's this idea that if there's one broken window, it's easy to be the next person to pick up a stone and break another window, but not many are willing to be the first. And so if we can take care of it before it becomes an issue, certainly leads to an improved community, I guess. For lack of a better word, it helps us keep things clean and orderly. So I appreciate the commentary there. Thank you, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation this evening. The second time, it was a great presentation when we saw it at the chamber. Would love to have seen more attendance on that, but thankfully this one is forever embedded in YouTube, and so now our residents will be able to see it there as well. But that brings me to one of the questions that I have. The checklist is easy to find on the website when you're looking for it, when you know what you're looking for. Do we have any type of a comms plan around the CEPTED program in making sure that this gets out through the town's communication channels so that the residents see it on a semi-regular basis? I look at something like this. I mean, the checklist is, just a guess, about 30 items long. Even if you had a once a month on our social media, it's the town's CEPTED tip of the month for your residents or something like that. Is there any type of plan as to how we communicate this out to the community?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Laurie. Not as intensive as you're describing. This checklist basically came from properties that the officers would attend more frequently than not. And so this was an easy win for them to say, we can help you out here. Here's a checklist. You can navigate through this on your own. We do have seen some success, so it's probably something that our team can certainly talk with we do an annual comms review, and it could be one of the lengthy list of things that we add to some of the things that we promote on an annual basis. So certainly something we can add to our list to increase our promotions, because it is a very valuable tool.
Excellent, thank you. And then, yeah, with that as well, going through the checklist, when you hear the presentation, you see that type of stuff, you get it well. But sometimes if I think if a general resident just got this checklist, they might not understand some of the things that are on here. So maybe just how that kind of, to free up your time so that a CPO isn't spending the time with a resident having to explain each and every one to have this tool. I mean, this is a fantastic tool, and it might seem pretty simplistic because it's just a check sheet, but this is a great thing for every resident in the town to go through their property, because again, prevention is the best option. So in light of that, knowing a little bit about CEPTED in the past, there's a higher level where CEPTED is integrated into development standards for new construction, residential, commercial, industrial. Do we have anything in regards to CEPTED in our development standards, and do we have any type of plans to integrate anything from CEPTED into our development standards?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Laurie, currently, formally, we do not. I do know in talking with the planning team from time to time on different projects, we certainly do talk about the CEPTED lens. We do have staff in-house that can look through our internal documents. City of Edmonton, as an example, Ms. Anderson and myself were talking about this afternoon, actually. They have a whole team that does a CEPTED evaluation on development permits that are put forward. So from a resource perspective, I don't know that we're at that level yet, but certainly there are staff that are familiar with this, and there's more conversation about it, I would say, in the last 2 years that I've been here versus the first 2 years that I've been here. We do have a lot of staff talking about, and this term comes up quite a bit when we're reviewing and looking at certain things. So,
excellent. No, appreciate it. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, seeing none, I will look to Councillor Loynes with the motion here, please.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the crime prevention through environmental design presentation be accepted for information.
Thank you, Councillor Loynes. Looking to council, any debate or discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Okay, seeing none, I'll call to question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. And that brings us to our council discussion. So we will look to Councillor Meyer first this evening.
Thank you for picking me first. I'll take a pass this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Councillor Pletchko.
Just one thing this evening. I'm just wondering if, with the onset of spring here and the problem that we have at the ponds with the students and children running around the community, if there's much of a comms program that's being put out at this point in time to inform the public that now is a good time to be staying off of our ponds and creeks and stuff like that. So.
Mr. Chair, good. Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Pletchko. There's a lot of communications going out, and there has been throughout the winter, because our ponds are not only a problem in the spring, they're also a problem in the winter time. So there's a fair bit of information around pond safety and staying off the ice at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pletchko. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was great last week to be able to attend the Alberta Municipalities President's Summit and the Spring Municipal Leaders Caucus. We heard both the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition speak. We got to hear from the Minister of Municipal Affairs. I know we had a couple council colleagues who had a meeting with the Minister, and so it was a great opportunity to, again, kind of hear some of the things that are happening, hear kind of what they're looking at from the election side of things, and understand what that might mean for our community. So I'm just grateful that we had that opportunity for that, and look forward to, what did we say, 30 some odd days, 27 days until that election kicks off, and hopefully we can start really moving some priorities for our municipality forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Loynes.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to administration, I've had the privilege today of walking significantly around town, and I noticed on several trails there's a lot of black knot in our trees. I know we've had a promotion on our comm side encouraging residents to get rid of their black knot. I'm wondering if we have somebody from the town doing that along the trails.
through the chair to Councillor Loyens, our staff are always looking for these things when available. If it's on town property, they're usually pretty good at addressing it. If there are some areas in private property, though, it's a little bit more of an information back and forth with the residents sometimes. If you have specific locations that you'd like us to look into, I would encourage you to shoot them to us and we'll take a look. Or if you have a general area, I know that saying pretty close on this trail is
Yeah.
not always specific.
Specifically in Greybrier, behind Greywood Terrace Townhomes, there's the trail that goes between Greywood Cove and around where the coyotes all hang out. I've noticed almost 90% of those trees were full of black knot.
I'll pass that on to the crews to go to take a look.
Awesome, appreciate that. And I just wanted to say happy early Easter to everybody. And that is all for me.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Loyens. And maybe a great time to remind residents that we do have the Report It tool on our website. And Black Knot is one of those things that can be reported that will get sent over to our staff, and those things can be taken care of. So thank you for bringing that up this evening. I do have a couple of questions related to Stony Plain making the national news. And I think there's a couple of general managers that are probably aware of this. We were not named in the live or recorded show, but we were listed on the website with a W5 News report around cement pipes that were installed 40, 50, 60 years ago, made out of asbestos cement. We are listed as one of the communities in the country that still has a portion of our water mains that are made out of that AC pipe. And it was interesting to hear, some of the dialogue around it throughout that, through the article and then through the TV segment as well. Certainly doesn't sound like there's a significant concern as long as everything stays static, but it is as soon as there's a disruption or a crack, that sort of thing, similar to inhaling asbestos. I think we're only 1.8-ish kilometers, according to that report, in terms of current water mains that are made out of that asbestos cement. But do you have some questions for administration this evening? First, just looking for some commentary on where in our community those asbestos cement water mains are located.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. Just for some additional context, we were contacted by CTV late in 2022, late in 2022, asking for any information that we could provide. We did send them some very general information that we do have. As the council's aware, the town's making significant investment in its asset management and understanding of our records and what's out there. So part of what we were able to answer for CTV was we came through that process. That said, I want to point out that we're still, while we've made a lot of progress, we're still making good progress on understanding exactly these locations. So generally speaking, the locations that we've identified are primarily found in Meridian, St. Andrews, and Oakview areas. Again, to be clear, we're always updating with new information because our records, and sometimes there's been work done on the lines that we haven't captured, and so those lines could have been replaced. We can't know that until we go dig them up. But as a general overview, those are the three areas that we've identified that are likely to have those lines.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the commentary on the ask from CTV as well. What are we doing currently with those lines or on those lines in terms of maintenance testing or otherwise to ensure the safety of our residents in regards to the risk that exists if there is a water main break on an asbestos cement line? Again, from the reading that I've done since, it sounds like that's where the potential for some health effects are, is in the break specifically. It's my understanding those pipes are nearing 50 years old. And so just looking for, some of the steps that we're taking internally to ensure safety of our residents moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some general comments to the question. So to identify the first question, currently the replacement of mains is not driven by whether it's an AC main or not. We are, again, going back, we're still at the very early stages of how we want to progress through main replacements in the town with this process. Generally, at this current moment, we're looking at it from a couple of different perspectives. The age, its condition, as well as any work history. So breaks per 100 kilometers per 100 meters, pardon me. So if we're noticing an increase in breaks, for example, in an area, not just asbestos cement, but any material, then we're looking at those maybe areas we have to focus on. For example, its age and condition also play a factor. Water mains are very difficult to condition rate, as there's no easy way to get into them and assess that. As you pointed out, AC lines are generally the greatest risk is when you have to cut into them. So if they're left alone, like most asbestos materials that have been used in buildings, for example, I want to stop short of saying they're completely harmless, but but to comment on the health effects. Currently, under the Canadian Drinking Water Quality Guideline Technical Document for asbestos, there is listed as no adverse health effects from drinking water related to asbestos lines. We are always in alignment, or working to be in alignment with AHS and Health Canada as regulations change, and they have in the past, and even in recent memory, there was a change in standards, for example, with lead testing that we had to pivot and do recently. So if those documents change, we do change our approach to prioritizing what has to be prioritized. Right now, we aren't necessarily prioritizing AC lines. However, that could be something that we do as we get more involved with our utilities replacement. It's something of a conversation with our utilities crews of where we start looking to make the best bang for our buck, but also being mindful that we want to keep public health and safety paramount in any work that we do.
Yeah, I appreciate the commentary there. One of the, I guess, concerns that I have is because there's not, a regulation in Canada or in Alberta that suggests what would be safe, if you will, in terms of how much asbestos could be ingested through drinking water. It's my understanding that it's not something that's regularly tested. So my understanding is we do test our water. That is regulated. We can take water from the tap, send it away to be tested. But testing for asbestos wouldn't be one of the tests that would be done because it's not. There's not a specific standard that currently exists. In my research, I've, looked at a number of papers over the last few years that, do speak to some of the potential hazards of ingesting asbestos water at certain levels and the latency period of the effect, being even up to 30 or 40 years. So something we may not realize in the short term. And so are there steps that we can take to have that water tested in those areas that you've referenced to ensure, again, the safety of our residents in regards to asbestos particles in the drinking water?
Through the chair, it's something I could certainly circle back with council on what steps we could take. Right now, we are staying with our current water testing plans as we currently do. But I can certainly ask the teams about what testing guidelines we could look into and then start that dialogue from there.
I think the fact that we know we have the pipe, we know that there is the possibility of there being some ill side effects if there is, breaks and asbestos in the water. From my position, I feel like we'd be doing our due diligence to have that tested. It is something I wouldn't mind, a follow-up from an administration in terms of what can be done. The last piece, and you spoke to this a little bit, would be around replacement. And it's my understanding it's some of the oldest pipe that we have in our community. I can appreciate that there are many things that are to be considered. You had mentioned lead pipe as well. On one hand, we're a municipality that has a very small amount of this AC water main in our community compared to others. But at the same time, we are aware. And, there has been some reports about, potential effects there. And so again, I think our due diligence to ensure resident safety would be top of mind for me. So I appreciate the commentary and your time taking or finding answers to my questions. So thank you for that. And finally, Councillor Loyens mentioned a happy Easter, but it's my understanding that our admin team has been preparing a bit of an Easter hunt for residents. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first sort of goodies will go out on Friday, and that will continue throughout the weekend. So for our residents, if you happen to be out and about or you're looking for something to do, get out, enjoy our trail system, and look for those goodies hidden around the community. I believe there's a tag on there with some instructions that'll show that it's a Town of Stony Plain goodie, so you're not finding your neighbor's chocolates hidden in the field. So looking for that Town of Stony Plain logo as you search. With that, thank you again. The opportunity to chair another council meeting truly is a privilege to sit with some amazing councillors and work with a phenomenal administration team. So with that, we will adjourn this evening. Thanks so much.